Hi everyone, and welcome back to Latitude Live, our Women in Tech series. So we've been talking to some amazing women in the industry to hear firsthand their experiences, to hopefully provide a bit of insight for how businesses can attract, retain and promote more women in technology. I thought who better to wrap up the series than the absolute powerhouse who is Gretchen Scott. For those of you that don't know, Gretchen is a former community manager at Cloudflare. She's a leading female executive in technology. She's also a director at Women Who Code Melbourne, a coach at StartMate. If that wasn't enough, she's also the CEO of the Human Collective, a community that helps organizations grow balanced technology teams and promote diversity within influential tech roles. So Gretchen, thank you so much for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you wrapping up the series. I guess first of all, thank you for joining, and I'd really love to know a bit more about you and your journey into technology.
Faye, thanks for having me, and what a beautiful introduction. It's always a bit strange having someone say back to you the things you fill your day with. A little bit of an intro to me. I didn't start in tech, actually. I dropped out of high school a week into year 11. I went and worked at McDonald's. I was a teenage mother and by all standards, a complete and utter failure according to society. But then I decided I quite liked maths and went to university and studied optimization modelling, which in New Zealand is a commerce degree. In Australia, I think it comes under science. And I had the best time. We learnt to code in Visual Basic, which no one even knows exists anymore. I'm showing my age. So I studied operations research and then have had the most fabulous career pathway through agricultural trade shows, high-end catering and six-figure wedding receptions, plastic surgery startup. I've worked teaching web development at a fabulous technology startup in Australia that got acquired by Cloudflare. I've been so lucky and had the best career of anyone I know, actually. I don't think you meant to say that. But along the way, I got super, super passionate about building good technology with really diverse groups of people, which is how we met, Faye, because I think I was having one of my moments where we need to do this better.
Yeah, I mean, what a story as well. I think that it's really important to highlight that, the journey into technology can take many forms. And I think, one of the things you mentioned around dropping out of high school, that is really not the be all and end all. And I think, before I go on to too much of before I go too off course, that I think that's one of the really, really important things that we need to look at is that entry level into technology, especially if we're going to have more diversity and inclusion. I'm reading a really interesting book. It's actually on feminism. It's Women Don't Owe You Pretty. And it was talking about how the issue with diversity, racial diversity in particular, isn't really so much around a company's agenda and them saying that they don't discriminate, but it really roots back more into university and how, Black individuals are less likely to complete and be supported and to enter universities. So I think that journey into technology is kind of really where we start with when we think about kind of, the less traditional pathways and those people that are really successful like yourself, taking different pathways into the industry. So really great point there, and sorry for going a bit off course.
It's bound to happen.
Yeah, I know, right? And for you, so I'd really love to know, why is diversity and inclusion so important in the technology industry?
Look, how long have we got? You might just lose me for about 2 hours on this one. I think tech is, everyone used to say it's ubiquitous. It's, it touches every part of our lives at the moment. And I think over the last year or so, I've probably moved into going, yeah, ubiquitous or pervasive, right? It is in every single part of our life. And it still is being built by a very small subset of the population, and great people, right? Like, I'm not saying this, typically it's middle-class white guys in Australia, great people, but they have a little thing called privilege hazard, right? A lot of them went to a private school, then went through university and got a computer science degree, and they've got their life experience is just, there's some risks and some harms and some incidents that would never cross their mind as being something they should consider when they're building products. So awesome people with great skills, but just have some blind spots. And I think because tech is in every single part of our life, if we don't have a really varied group of people involved in the building of the products, we run the risk of, I mean, from a commercial point of view, I think you can build products that don't make you enough money and cut off whole customer segments, which is just stupid business, right? Like, no one wants to make less money or have a product that's used less. But if you go to the other end of the spectrum with that, you can be building stuff that's actually just really, really harmful and dangerous. And I think if I had 3 hours, we would be talking about how a lot of the technology and data and products we're building can be used for surveillance and tracking and harassment. And those are not new things in society. They've existed forever. It's just now we're building tools that can kind of amplify the impact of them. So, you know, for example, anything that tracks where you are on your phone, or the ability to follow your car if someone else has got it. It's got a little bit out of control, and I think we don't know, the average person doesn't know how to undo the settings to stop being tracked. And I think if the people building the technology have different life experiences or are coming up against other people with other life experiences, then we're going to build better products. I think a really good example in a commercial sense of this is, it's a long time ago, there was a website that hosted recipes for people to cook. And there was a plethora of them, and there was more and more and more coming out, and they made their money by advertisements on the page, which meant it came back to viewership or time spent. And what happened is one of them made a screen reader work really well. So screen readers help visually impaired people navigate websites or understand what's going on the website without them having to kind of be really close, or potentially they can't see it at all. And this one particular website, their viewership went up exponentially, like more than the number of visually impaired people that were accessed. Like, it made no sense. The numbers were like, So they started doing some research into who was using their site now. And it turns out there was a whole heap of people with young children using it, because when they were cooking, they had a child on their hip. And so they didn't have enough hands to cook and push the button and scroll. And so a screen reader made it a better product for them as well. So if you've got diverse people in your team and you're listening to them and including them, then you're going to build better products, and they won't be harmful or less likely to be harmful, but they'll actually just be better economically as well from a business case.
Absolutely. I was muted there. And I think as well, you know, I think kind of going back to that attraction piece is that, you know, people don't want to be in businesses that are creating harmful and, you know, problematic products a lot of the time. So I think it kind of feeds back into that, you know, commercial piece, being socially responsible, but also that attraction piece as well. And so we know that it's very important to have that, you know, diversity within teams. And we know that we're lacking that. You know, when we look at the current kind of gender breakdown in Australia, I think it's around 14, don't quote me on this, but around 14% female Australia-wide. And we know that there's, you know, it's not necessarily just that kind of entry, but women kind of leaving the tech industry as well. And why do you think that women are, you know, more likely to leave the tech industry?
I have many thoughts on this. I spent quite a few years teaching web development and working really hard to get more diverse people writing code and being involved and in the tech industry. And then over the last few years, I started hearing from them, and they were saying, I've had enough. I'm leaving. I'm going to go do something else. I'm exhausted. I'm sick of the chaos. I'm out. So I started doing some research, and it transpires that 56% of women leave the tech industry mid-career in Australia, which is more than double the rate of men leaving. I mean, because everyone leaves an industry, right? It's not ever going to be zero, but it's such a huge number. And I think when we've got so few people coming in at the start, it's quite problematic, right? So I'd started doing some research around this actually, and there's 4 main reasons that are given for women leaving the industry. The first one is just an absolute no-brainer and super easy to fix. It's around the pay gap, and it does exist. Turns out in Australia, on graduation from a computer science degree, women earn about 18% less than a man. And I know there's an argument that says women should ask for more, but actually I'm going to flip that on its head and say, you know what, if you've got, I don't know, Shan coming for a job and she's amazing and you want to hire her, and you've got Steve coming for a job and he's also amazing and you want to hire him, and you were going to pay him 100K, but she only asked for 90, just pay her 100. Like it's not that hard. You can fix it on day 0 and it will save you money in the long run, because the moment you find out the person beside you is paid more for doing the same job, you kind of check out of the organization and you've lost someone that you thought was amazing enough to hire. It's a bit silly. So that's an easy number 1 fix. The second reason that was given quite often is around flexibility. And this was to do with a 9 to 5 in the office. So the research is a little bit old, and I'm not sure whether COVID has made this better or worse, probably a little bit of both. So, we're not needing to go to the office every day at the moment, and no organization seems to be doing that, but also caregiving responsibilities have gone up for women. So I'm yet to figure out if we've leveled stuff or made it worse or where we're at. But I think, COVID's been completely disastrous, but what it has done is put other options on the table for organizations to consider. And that's got to be a good place to start in that space. Another reason that's given is, well, I guess if you go into technology, you just want to fix tricky problems. And to your point, Faye, you want to do interesting things that mean something. And often it seems that women are given kind of the boring jobs in tech and not given promotions at the same rate or with the same support as their male counterparts. And I really want to research this a bit more, but there seems to be a correlation between your first promotion and whether you make it to an executive suite or not. And I'm intrigued to know what that looks like with a bit more detail. The 4th reason that's given is the one that just makes me a bit wild, to be honest. I get really furious about this one. And I think it's not just in tech, but I think tech lets you measure it. And it's around perceived incompetence of women. So a few years back, maybe 2019, GitHub did a study on open source code. And that's when anyone can contribute to kind of like this information. So you're saving information and someone has to say, that's okay. Well, no, it's not. Go fix this thing. And so it has a kind of checking loop that happens. And it turned out that women's code was accepted slightly more, like 1% or so, I can't remember exact numbers, than men's, but only if it didn't seem like they were a woman. If they were obviously a woman by their kind of avatar and name, then it was rejected at a higher rate, and not for technical reasons typically. A lot of it was around the comments they'd written or stuff that didn't impact it so much. So it seems that women are held to a higher standard. And I think if that's your day-to-day experience, it's just exhausting.
That's really interesting, actually, that you bring that up, because I think it's something that we actually see in day-to-day with kind of unhelpful, helpful advice or unsolicited advice. So that's a really interesting one, and one that I haven't kind of heard so much of. I think the pay gap and the flexibility are all things that, we can fix, with relative ease. And I think the third thing around that gap between the promotion between women or males and females, do you think it could be something to do with that confidence, and not having to ask for these things? Same thing with, not having to ask for a higher salary. I think it's about how businesses kind of track and promote people without them like asking for it, I suppose.
100% agree with that. And I've been reading a book fabulous title. It's called Why So Many Incompetent Men Leaders. And it talks to how we have these preconceived notions of what success looks like. And actually, it's not particularly helpful, but we all do it. So, you know, if you're going to promote someone to leadership, you do it because they're confident and extroverted, typically. But that actually has very little correlation to whether they're a good leader or not. And I think we do that across the board, particularly in tech as well, because it's kind of it has been a masculine career in the last little while, you know, way back in Bletchley Park time, it wasn't so much. But I think we really need to start looking at what it is we're promoting for and why. And anecdotally, I've seen women be encouraged and kind of pushed into doing the glue work around teams and bringing people together and making sure an organization is working well. And they're not getting promoted because maybe they didn't write as many lines of code, which I also think is a really rubbish metric, as the guy beside her. So I think leadership and management have a real responsibility to rebalance this and keep an eye on things. But also they need to be supported to do it. So it has to come from the very, very top.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And what do you think businesses can do to attract and retain more women?
Wow. And tech is in such a high demand position at the moment, right? Like the wheels have turned. I think, you know, if an organization really wants to attract and retain women, they need to start thinking, I guess there's lots and lots of things, but one is they need to build out an EVP, an employee value proposition. COVID, I hate talking about COVID because it feels so miserable in so many ways, but it has led a lot of people to reevaluate what they're doing and where they're spending their time. And I've seen a big shift from people wanting to make sure they're spending their work time doing something meaningful. So they're not just going to go to work to make someone a whole heap of, and themselves a whole heap of money. There has to be a values alignment somewhere. So organizations are needing to put out to the world and advertise why they should be working with them. So giving their staff a purpose, which means you've actually got to think it through. And if what you're offering is just a whole heap of money, some people might be up for that. But if you're offering an opportunity to work at a really tricky problem, maybe you'll get people that are going to come to work and just give that bit of discretional effort and just want to be there. So I think building out a genuine EVP is a great starting point, and it makes your organization kind of review where they're at and what they're doing. So it's not a wasted task by any stretch of anything. But aside from that, I think if you're looking at diversity and inclusion and building out a better team to make better products and actually just have a better work life, then you need to start with inclusion first. And a lot of organizations don't, because the diversity side of it's almost easier. You can look out and go, hey, that team's got, you know, a 70-30 gender split, we can fix that. And you can watch the metrics change. Whereas inclusion is quite nebulous. It's not how do you measure that, right? How do you go back to the board and go, we've nailed inclusion, or we're on our way, we're tracking. It doesn't have that same piece in it. But, you know, everyone says they care about D&I, but the inclusion piece is just a true lived experience. You have to bring people with you. And I think that's around, you have to celebrate the differences that are there, as opposed to having diverse people and kind of just saying, you look diverse, but I want you to be just like everyone else and fit in this box. So start with inclusion. And another a really great place to start thinking about this and getting a nudge in the right direction is get an accreditation badge. And there's a few organizations that do this, and they'll come to you and they'll say, typically, I'm kind of generalizing really fast here, they will ask you a few questions, go through a checklist and say, you probably need to fix that, or let's work on this thing, and then come back in a bit when you've done the work and said, cool, I think you'd be a great place for diverse people to come and be. And if you are a diverse person, I mean, this is again anecdotally, I know a lot of women that flatly refuse to even look at some organizations because they've heard just one too many horror stories. So you need to be recognized in the community as being a good employer. And a way to get this done, boards have new ESG, so environmental, social, and governance initiatives coming through. And some of that focus is around diversity. So if if you play it right, the board might have some cash and sponsorship that can help these things actually move forward. So use ESG metrics to your advantage would be a hot tip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's, you know, it's that candidate experience, that lived experience as well, which is so important. So, you know, as much as you can have an amazing EVP, which is, you know, a great place to start with talent attraction, but it's about how do we live that and how do we demonstrate that through our candidate experience end to end. So, you know, if someone's interviewing with me, you know, how do we show that we are an attractive place to work, regardless of whether they're successful at the interview, because we know that candidates will have a network of, you know, 20 plus people in the same industry. So I think that's, you know, a really important point to make as well. And I guess kind of for leaders that are, you know, in an organization and, you know, the organization is kind of doing this at kind of a larger level, but what can people do kind of individually to help kind of promote more diversity and inclusion?
Firstly, if you're a leader and you're interested in this and you're taking the time to listen and learn, yay, like that's awesome. I love it. I love that people are caring and looking at taking steps to make it different and better. That's, you know, stupid grin, makes me happy. There's a whole heap of things you can do, and a lot of them are really simple. If you've gotten to be a leader in tech, then probably it's come from, well, not even just tech, it's come from a lot of hard work, right? But it's also come from some privilege and some systemic things that are built up that have made that just a little bit easier for you than others around you. So I think recognizing that piece, and I'm saying you've worked really hard, and I get it because I think I've worked really hard to get where I am, but also I'm a white woman in Australia. There's a whole heap of barriers I didn't have to get through, around, or over. So it's good to acknowledge that piece, but it doesn't take away from the hard work. I also think that if you can recognize the privilege that helped you get to where you are, then maybe you can help others who don't have exactly that. And some really good steps to do that is about creating space for others around you. So one of the most simple ways of doing it is making sure meetings go well. Because if you're in a position of leadership, you have some power and some ability to make things different. And let's say, for example, Faye's in a meeting with Steve, and Faye says, oh my gosh, I want to do this interview series. And she starts talking about how amazing it is and how we're going to put it on LinkedIn, and everyone's going to start really caring about this and what metrics she's hoping to get out of it. And Steve starts talking over the top about on Tuesday he's going to go play golf, but also he's had this really great idea about this video series. Your job at that point is to go, that's great, Steve. I think Faye brought that up earlier. Can we go back and delve a bit further into it? You need to make space for the minority groups to be heard, because they are not. And that's because of the systems and structures we've put in place. And I think that's one of the simplest things you can do in the world. Another thing you can do is mentor and sponsor, because you're going to learn a whole heap. Like, from a selfish point of view, you will learn so much by being a mentor to someone who has got a total different life experience to you. Honestly, you will get more out of the relationship than they will. They will also get a lot. You will be opening up networks and information to them that they don't have. And there's heaps of groups you can do it through, or you can literally just look around and find someone who doesn't look like you. People are always looking for mentors and sponsors, and it's such a great piece of work. Honestly, I think the people I've mentored, I've taken more than I've given, which is not how it's meant to be. So don't follow me for advice on that one. Another one that I'm quite passionate about is if there are speaking opportunities. I'll give you an example. There's this fabulous gentleman in Perth who was asked to give a talk at a very technical conference. And he responded by saying, who else is talking? And it turns out it was, there was like five guys in their 50s who had all been to the same university. And, it was very mono something. And so he said, hey, can I swap out for someone else that's not diverse at all? And they kind of went, yeah, but you're kind of like a big name. We'd like you there. So he went back to them and said, cool. Can I have a longer time slot? And they were like, yeah, sure. Because they wanted him to come and talk. And what he did was turn up with two amazing women that he works with. And he introduced it. Like, he went on stage and said, lovely to be here. I would like to introduce to you Sarah, who is an expert in XYZ, and she did her talk. And then when she finished, he goes, and also Jane, who has done FWZ. And so he used his platform to amplify other people around him. And I think, I mean, what a great, simple solution, really. So amplify those around you, give them space and time.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. And I think that kind of community piece as well, and, kind of going out there, meeting people, kind of giving them and listening to their voice as well. And I think that there's some great, community events, and now we're starting, fingers crossed, to be able to start meeting and doing these things in person. I think it's a great opportunity for kind of leaders to get involved in different initiatives and kind of, different talks and kind of different areas. So some great insights there. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for joining me today. And if anyone's interested in hearing more about Gretchen's work and the Human Collective, I will put all her socials and the website in the links. And have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.